Is France ready to walk away from NATO? A political storm has erupted in Paris after a proposal to leave the alliance was formally submitted to parliament. The move comes from Clémence Goethe, vice president for the National Assembly and lawmaker from the left-wing party France Unbowed, who says the United States should not longer be considered an ally. She accuses Washington of pressuring Europe, issuing threats over Greenland and forcing trade decisions on the European Union. On that basis, she argues France should reclaim its military and diplomatic independence, relying on its own nuclear deterrence. Analysts say this is no longer a fringe idea. The center-left bloc holds the largest group in parliament, and Marine Le Pen's right-wing party, long critical of NATO, remains a powerful political force. For now, it is just a proposal, but the debate itself has already sent shockwaves through Europe's security conversation. Dictator Putin still wants to take control of all of Ukraine, according to former NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. Speaking to German media, Stoltenberg said Western strategy should focus on increasing the cost of the war rather than trying to change the Kremlin's intentions. He noted that Russian forces are making only limited advances and continue to suffer heavy losses, adding that even after years of fighting, Moscow has not secured full control of the Donbass. Stoltenberg also urged European leaders to take recent signals from the White House regarding Greenland seriously, framing them as a broader security issue for Europe. Meanwhile, The Times reports intense fighting near the eastern city of Kupiansk, where Russian losses in recent clashes were significantly higher than Ukrainian casualties. A source in the British defense establishment said that by late December 2025, up to 200 Russian troops had been surrounded in and out the city. The Ukrainian delegation has arrived in the United States for talks on peace, security, and Ukraine's economic recovery. The delegation includes National Security and Defense Council Secretary Rustem Umerov, head of the Presidential Office Kyrylo Budanov, and parliamentary leader David Arahamian. According to Budanov, the Ukrainian team will meet with the U.S. representatives to discuss the details of a potential peace agreement. The American side is represented by U.S. Presidential Envoy Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and U.S. Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll. The visit also focuses on security guarantees and a long-term economic framework for Ukraine. These talks are expected to continue next week at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where the presidents of Ukraine and the United States are set to meet. At the center of the agenda is the so-called Prosperity Plan, which aims to mobilize up to $800 billion over the next decade to rebuild Ukraine's economy and attract international investments, loans, and grants. Ukrainian officials say the plan is aligned with the European Union and does not affect Ukraine's path towards EU membership. And while Ukraine negotiates diplomacy and security abroad, it is still fighting for stability at home, especially in energy. Russian strikes and severe winter weather have caused emergency situations in multiple cities and communities, with repair teams and utility crews working around the clock to restore power and heating.
The Prime Minister of Ukraine and the Deputy Prime Minister reported today on energy, on the emergency situation in our various cities and communities caused by Russian strikes and harsh weather. Across the country, maximum resources have been deployed. Literally, tens of thousands of people are currently working in repair crews, municipal services, and energy companies. And this joint work must continue at all levels of government, between government and business, and across all institutions and services.
The Trump administration is considering the creation of a peace council for Ukraine, a new body designed to oversee a future war settlement. According to the Financial Times, the idea involves setting up a formal council that would monitor compliance with any peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. The proposed body would include representatives from Ukraine, European countries, NATO, and Russia. Its role would be to track how the deal is implemented and respond to any violation. A senior Ukrainian official involved in the talks with Washington described the council as a key part of the U.S. proposals aimed at ending the war. The report notes there are currently no signs that Moscow is ready to seriously engage with a 20-point peace plan discussed by the United States, Ukraine, and their Western partners. Russia continues to demand territorial concessions, which Kyiv rejects, obviously. The Financial Times also says the Trump team is looking to applying a similar model to other conflicts, including in Venezuela. The concept could be unveiled as early as next week at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Poland has charged 5 men, 4 Ukrainians and 1 Russian, with acting on behalf of Russia's intelligence services in what prosecutors describe as a cross-border sabotage operating targeting Western logistics and aviation networks. According to Poland National Prosecutor's Office, the suspects were involved in preparing and organizing the shipment of parcels containing hidden incendiary devices and explosive to the United Kingdom and the United States, Canada and other countries. If convicted, all 5 face life imprisonment. Prosecutors say one suspect planned to assemble explosive and fire-trigger devices inside packages bound for the UK and Poland. Another allegedly worked on future sabotage operations, including test shipments sent to the US and Canada. Ukraine's foreign ministry told Western journalists the suspects were identified and detained in cooperation with Ukrainian authorities and warned citizens to ignore what it called easy money offers from Russian intelligence services. Ukraine is being offered a fast track to the EU with a gradual path toward full membership. In Brussels, officials are discussing a model of rapid political accession for Ukraine as part of a potential peace framework with Russia. Under the idea, Kyiv would gain political entry into the European Union first, while full membership rights, including voting power, would be granted step by step, depending on the progress of reforms. The concept is still at an early stage. It is meant to signal to Ukrainian society and investors that the country is moving toward economic stability and deeper integration with the West. Some diplomats have floated 2027 as a possible target year. However, many EU governments stress that accession remains a merit-based process that requires legal alignment and unanimous approval by all 27 member states. That is why a transitional model is being considered: fast political entry followed by phased access to full institutional rights. Supporters argue that time is a critical factor. A future peace deal could be difficult domestically, and even limited EU membership could serve as an anchor for stability and continued reform. Skeptics warn the approach may be hard to sell inside the Union, particularly to other candidate countries that have spent years moving through the traditional accession process. Germany has forced a suspected Russian Shadow Fleet oil tanker to change course in what could become a turning point in Europe's enforcement of sanctions, according to Bloomberg. The vessel, an Aframax tanker calling itself Arcusat, was sailing through the narrow strait between Denmark and Sweden, signaling a destination to the Gulf of Finland, a key route for Russian oil export. Then suddenly it turned around. Now it's heading north towards Russia's Arctic coast. What makes this ship unusual is not just its route, but its identity. And Equasis, one of the world's most widely used maritime database, Arcusat is listed as a vessel that never existed in the International Maritime Organization's registry. No ship can be found under its IMO number. In other words, a tanker moving thousands of tons of oil across European waters without a paper trail. German media report that authorities pressured the vessel to reverse course. Federal police say an investigation is underway and refuse to comment further. Putin has taken what he needs from Iran and now appears in no rush to step in for Tehran. That is the assessment of a British journalist, Mark Bennett, in a column for The Times. As the protests continue in Iran, Moscow is showing little sign of offering direct support to the regime. Bennett argues that Kremlin is increasingly avoiding moves that could lead to a direct confrontation with the United States. He says this pattern has already played out in Syria and Venezuela and now seems to be repeating itself with Iran. Analysts warn this is hurting Russia's image as a reliable partner and weakening its effort to build an anti-Western bloc. Failed air defense systems in Venezuela, the seizure of a Shadow Fleet tankers, and Moscow's muted response to U.S. pressure over Cuba all point to a power with big ambitions but limited room to act. The main constraint, they say, is Ukraine. Russia's military remains tied down in a prolonged war, forcing the Kremlin to choose between staying focused on the battlefield or risking a wider clash with Washington elsewhere. On Iran, experts add that Moscow has already extracted key benefits, especially access to drone technology that Russia later copied and improved. Giving something back is no longer a priority. Putin continues to present himself as a potential mediator in the Middle East, but Western observers say the reality is simpler. Russia is watching how far the United States is willing to go and is careful not to cross a line it cannot afford. Greenland's indigenous leaders are pushing back hard against US President Donald Trump's comments about taking control of the Arctic island. Sara Olsvik, the chair of the Inuit Council, say there is no such thing as a better colonizer and that people cannot be bought and sold like territory. Trump has turned Greenland into a geopolitical flashpoint by suggesting the United States could seek control of the island even by force. Denmark, which oversees Greenland as a semi-autonomous region, says a fundamental disagreement remains with Washington. Olsvik warns the issue goes far beyond Greenland. She says it reflects how powerful countries view smaller nations and indigenous peoples and why many see a return of colonial and imperial thinking.
First of all, that we think that there's simply no such thing as a better colonizer. This is clearly, formulated in a way that gives us a clear picture of how the U.S. administration views the people of Greenland, how the U.S. administration views peoples, indigenous peoples, and peoples that are few in numbers. And we have been rejecting that premise that you can buy and sell peoples.
Trump receives a peace prize, and CNN says this is no laughing matter. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has handed her Nobel Peace Prize medal to US President Donald Trump. While many saw it as a spectacle, CNN argues it raises a serious question whether major foreign policy decisions can be shaped by personal praise and symbolic gestures. Last year, Trump openly signaled his desire to win the Nobel Peace Prize. When the award instead went to Machado for her campaign against Nicolas Maduro's regime, she used the moment to appeal to Washington for support. Soon after, the Trump administration launched an operation targeting Maduro. Later, Trump declined to back Machado as a potential successor, saying she lacked domestic support. Then came the move that sparked controversy. She gave him her Nobel medal. CNN says the episode highlights how powerful flattery can be in global politics and how decisions about the fate of entire countries may be influenced, at least in part, by personal appeal rather than national interest. The Nobel Committee has emphasized that the Peace Prize remains formally tied to the original recipient, even if the physical model is passed on. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.